Welcome to Using Insert, and this is going to be part one of a two-part video because I'm going to show you quite a few code examples and I don't want to rush it. But we're going to look at some code examples using this insert command, and I just want to remind you, you can find a copy of all these code examples out there in your working files folder. So let's jump out into the SQL Server Management Studio and take a look at some of these. Now notice I just have a new query window open here, and I am running these against the AdventureWorks 2012. So make sure you choose that right up here. Now let's start off, let's look at the table that we're going to work with. I'm going to select all from, we're going to work in the production schema and the unit measure table. And if I execute that, I'll just press F5. You can see that we have three columns in this table: unit measure code, name, and modified date. Unit measure code is an abbreviation, the name is the spelled out description, and then of course modified date. Well, let's do a simple insert into this. I'm going to put insert into, and then I'll put the table that I want to insert into, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is list the columns that I want to insert into. And the first one is unit measure code. Then I'll do name. Then I'll do that modified date. So we're going to insert into all three of our columns in that order. Make sure you get that. And then we're going to put the keyword values, and now inside parentheses, we're just going to put the values that we want to insert, and these are positional. And so we're going to do FT for feet. Let me mention something about these literals here in case I haven't made this clear. We put these single quotes around things and call them literals when we're telling the processor or the compiler, if you will, I want you to use this value. FT is not some sort of keyword. It's not some sort of directional thing for Transact SQL. It's a literal value I want you to use. Now, if I put numbers in, it knows that, and it'll just use them. I don't have to delimit those with anything. But when I'm doing literal values that I want it to use just what I tell it, I put them in these, and that's why they're called literals. So then I'm going to put a date, 04/14/2008. And since that is a data type and modified date, it can figure that out. Now notice, make sure you get this. These values are positional. The first value I put here is going in the first column I mentioned here, which is unit measure code. The second value is going into the second column, third value into the third column. So let's highlight that and execute it, and you'll notice that it's telling me that I have violated primary key constraint. Well, wait a minute, what's going on there? I'll go out there, I will open this, look inside the table, and yes, I already have a feet. Well, we can fix that here for the purposes of our example. We'll add a different one. We'll put FT2 in there, and notice it works. Now, keep in mind what you just saw. These insert commands are still subject to primary key constraints, unique constraints, any other constraints that you have on the table. We can also put multiple rows into a table at one time. And actually, I'm just going to change this one. I'm going to put an FT3 and a feet 3. And then notice I can put a comma here, just as if it was a column. And I'll highlight all of my values there that I'm inputting, and I'll paste them right here. And now to avoid that ugly primary key thing, we'll just call it FT4 and feet 4. And if I highlight that, notice two rows went in. This row went in, as did this row. Pretty cool stuff. Now let's talk about the insert select option. The insert select option is where we can use the results of a select statement as part of our insert statement. So we're going to insert into a table the result set of a query. Now to do this, we have to have a table already existing. And we don't have that, so we're going to take a shortcut here. We are going to create our own little table out there, and we're going to call it employee sales. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this create table. Notice here, we're creating a data source column with varchar 20, not null, business entity ID, last name, and sales dollars, okay? So I will highlight the create table, I'll execute it, and notice I now have a create table. And if I were to go out here and look in my AdventureWorks tree over here in the object browser and go into tables, do we see an employee sales? Yes, there it is. So we just created it, and so everything's cool with that. So we've created this table. Now let's take a look at using an insert select. Okay, I'm going to make that results window go away. And so what I want to do now is I'm just going to drop an insert select statement in here. And then we'll talk about what's going on because it's a little bit complicated. It's not really that complicated, but you'll be going crazy with this before long. Notice we're going to insert into employee sales, the table we just created, and we're going to insert in it the results of this select statement. So notice we're passing in a literal into the first column select, then we're grabbing business entity ID, the last name, sales year to date from salesperson as SP. Then we're joining, and then we're joining on these columns right here. And then we're putting a where clause where the business entity ID is like 2. And then we're ordering by this. And so I'm going to insert into, and there it goes. And we just inserted 17 rows into that table. Now let's stop right here. This will be the end of part 1. Join me in part 2, and we'll take up right here and continue.